have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary Horror Podcast. I'm your host, Coale, and with me, as always, I have my good friend and co-host, Aaron.
Hello, back again.
Back again in the spooky month.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Halloween, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to die. Just kill me.
Oh, all right. Well, calm down. Calm down, nihilism.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Today's episode is coming at the recommendation of Dave Dr. Shockbecker from the last episode we did.
Shout out to Dave.
Yeah, Dave!
It's Dave! That's fine. I'm literally shouting it out. So.
It was good. It was a good shout out. I appreciate the shout out, and I'm sure he does as well. Recommending the film Heretic, which came out last year. Now, Aaron, had you ever heard of the film Heretic?
I had to be reminded which film it was, but I do remember seeing Hugh Grant as a spooky role guy, and that's all I know about it. It was from the brief promos I saw, and been like, this isn't a rom-com, and that's about all I got.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's kind of like my same exposure to Heretic. Like, I heard, like, oh yeah, there's a movie Heretic coming out, and I'm like, okay. And then people be like, yeah, I saw Heretic, and I was just like, cool. And then that was it. And it wasn't really...
not as much buzz as some of the other horror titles in the past couple years.
Yeah, so I'm curious if there's like a validity to it, or there just wasn't as big of a reception to it.
Yeah,
it always makes me...
There's some bangers that just go under the radar, so maybe it's one of those. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. I don't have any sort of background, any sort of input, and so therefore the intro is going to be pretty dadgum short. It's like, okay, I don't know what Heretic is.
We'll just get into it. We'll just have to discuss our favorite Hugh Grant rom-coms and stuff.
Yeah. Mine's Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
Oh, yeah, he was in that movie.
Yeah. Good rom-com. Good rom-com.
Yeah, there was some romance.
Yeah, there's a little bit, Bradley Cooper as a halfling romance.
Yeah.
So see, there you go. We're just winning already. But let's see how this lovely rom-com Hugh Grant's in goes whenever we get back from watching Heretic. I guess that's going to be my segue to the review. Sure, why not?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We don't talk about
Taco Bell.
And we are back from watching Heretic. Well, did you find it heretical?
Yeah. Heretic. That's not a word. It was an r/atheist-ass movie.
It could be if you believe in it.
That's true.
See, there you go. What are your thoughts on Heretic?
I was pleasantly surprised. Man, it was a good movie. I think that opening was hilarious.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think it really set... I think a lot of the aspects of this movie, specifically in the first half, obviously we can't talk about spoiler stuff yet in this section of the podcast, but I think they really did a great job of foreshadowing, of setting up little symbols and stuff that would pay off later, and really embracing that sort of thriller title of sort of setting up little clues while also making everything a little tense, just little details that increased the tension as the movie went on, while still having all the fun levity of Hugh Grant's character being kind of hilarious, and a lot of the conversations and stuff they having being really funny, but also interesting and engaging. So I think overall, I think I enjoyed it, but definitely an r/atheist ass movie.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. It's one of those things that I could see people being like, "Oh, that's me."
Yeah, dude. You're totally owning her in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah. I also was very surprised as well whenever it came to this film. Like, I have to agree with Aaron in the fact that I believe that it has one of the best cold opens I've heard in any sort of horror genre
It was pretty
film. Like, and I think that like for me immediately, because I'm so used to like typically with films like, okay, you know, it's warming up, you know, we're just waiting for it to heat up. But I feel like this film just kind of like immediately is like, okay, here you go. And it's not even like one of those things that it was still warming up, but it already felt like I was already like intrigued with the conversation.
Yes.
Given the fact of how bizarre it was and how funny it was.
Yes, and it also, I mean, it introduces the two main characters extremely well, what they believe and why that's important. You find out later why that's important to the movie, but like where they stand, who they are as characters, in a way that's like really funny. I don't know. It's a well written concept. Like that's how you characterize. So often, whenever we're complaining about like one dimensional characters in horror movies or whatever, like that's literally they could have done nothing else besides that scene, and I would have gotten who these two girls are.
I think that's a fair point. Like, legitimately, they could have left it there and you would know exactly who they were. But because, again, this film does have a very small cast, I feel like that only makes it even more beneficial because it's like you get so much characterization right at the beginning, and then you have the rest of the film to not only explore with the characters, but the situation that they find themselves in. So, yeah, definitely very good initial impressions going into the film, and yeah, good film overall. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the plot, I suppose, since that's usually pretty important. So basically from the scene Aaron and I were talking about, it basically opens up with two sisters of a Mormon congregation, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton. And basically they're doing as Mormons do, going from door to door to kind of talk about the Book of Mormon and trying to convert them over and just kind of explain that as per their usual evangelical responsibilities that comes with being part of the congregation. But one of the first stops that they have to make is at a gentleman's house named Mr. Reed, who is very curious about the Church of the Latter-day Saints, as it were, and invites them in to talk about their own perspectives, their views, their religion, except for the fact that it quickly becomes apparent that things aren't what they seem to be, and the two sisters find themselves in a not so favorable situation.
A little bit of a pickle.
Yeah. And whenever it comes to plot point, it was definitely one of those things that I think whenever it comes to sort of like a hostage situation sort of film, I'm usually hit or miss about. I've seen films where they've make it work, but then I've seen films where I'm like, okay, we're going through like the same beats, motions, everything else. But I have to say, I don't believe I've ever seen sort of a hostage situation such as this. Like, I genuinely think it is probably the most unique perspective where I wasn't even prepared for where the film was going to go, especially towards the first half of the film.
Yeah.
It was like completely up in the air, and I have to give major kudos. I mean, I think ultimately one of the biggest strengths that I immediately recognize as soon as the film started is that the script is very tight, especially with dialogue, but also with the story narrative as well. Because basically it's so hard to not spoil some aspects of it, so I think it's going to be kind of a light spoilery sort of situation discussing it, but it definitely got profoundly deep. Again, not to go too like, you know, atheists are Reddit thread, everything, but it did bring up a lot of interesting points for the characters to discuss with one another. And I think Mr. Reed sort of being a foil to the sisters in that regard was a very interesting watch. And I genuinely believe not only was the script very well done, especially with dialogue, but also story-wise, but also just performance delivery in general. Because I feel like you can have a good script, but if it doesn't have a good performance, it makes the script weaker, and vice versa. You can have strong performers, weak script. sort of back and forth, but I truly believe both performances and scripts were on point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it was a well-researched script, too. I mean, I'm not, some religious theologist or whatever, but one of the characters in there is, and they do a lot of, I mean, I joke about it being an r/atheist-ass movie, because there's a lot of religious debate featured in the movie. And it, I'm no expert, but I have dived into that world. I'm an atheist myself, so when I make these criticisms, I'm not, it's not coming from a place of like, well, Hugh Grant, you silly Billy, actually God does exist, checkmate. But, I think it was actually not, I think that kind of script can be insufferable really quickly, and it was not, because of how Hugh Grant played the role, because of how meticulously researched it appeared to be, at least for my amateur brain, and because of how just well written each part was, and there was like pushback, because it's a lot of the movie features around sort of. I mean, you might imagine from the term heretic, it definitely features around this sort of belief-disbelief debate.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely an interesting aspect, because I do think, like, it's interesting, right? Whenever it comes to religion in the world, obviously, like, with how evangelical the main ones are, like Christianity and everything else around that area, I think it's easier to kind of like dunk on the religions, to kind of like point out the absurdity of it and everything. But I feel like the film surprisingly doesn't really bash on religion too much.
It's more nuanced, than you might think from some descriptions of it.
Which I think that's harder to do.
Oh,
I think it's harder to do that, and
it's so easy to make like a one side or the other, a hokey ass, God's not dead type movie, and it's so easy to make like get tips my fedora at your God, milady, like ass movie. But like walking that line that's like respectful while still being honest, while still trying to make a point, is very difficult, and to show like an earnest, like good faith both sides debate in a script like this, I think it's very challenging, but they pulled it off.
Which is wild, because again, like with the film, it's more like a suspense horror film, so you're having this deeply theological debate amongst the characters while they're in this horrific situation, which it's honestly kind of surprising at the very least. So because whenever
I think even central to that point is a lot of the movie, there's significant question of like how much danger they're in. Like, everything's sus, and that's what makes it a thriller. But without spoiling anything, it's like, is something going to happen? Is it not? Like a lot of the movie is about that, and that plays into the theme of like religion. Is it going to happen? Is it not? There's like a faith element. Like, do we believe that we're going to get fucking murdered in this guy's house, or do we believe that we're going to be able to reach the other side? So I think there's even layers to it there.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and so I think, again, I never would have thought a film talking about condoms at the beginning, Magnum condoms
and amateur pornos and
at the beginning. Like, I mean, I knew already. I'm like, okay, this is a well written script already. Like with that cold open, but especially just deeply thought provoking.
Yeah,
it was. So really, that's one of the things that I was kind of. It's sadly kind of surprised by at the very least, because I have not seen too many films try to challenge the audience's thinking.
Right, and I would file this neatly in a lot of films like Get Out, a lot of these sort of new psychological thrillers that ask questions of like, what are the horrors that people actually deal with in their real day lives, and not just like masked men stabbing you or whatever, but like, Get Out is a great example to me, an analogy to me for this film, because it's like it makes a horror film out of like tense race relations in a way that makes sense and is enjoyable to watch by a wide range of audiences. I think this does the same thing with like theological debate. Like, it's scary to think that there's no God out there and you die and you rot and there's no afterlife and all these horrors in the world happen for no reason. It's also scary to think that there is a God and he turns a blind eye to things like the Holocaust and babies dying of bone cancer. Yeah, these are horrors that if you grapple with them, if you choose to, that are things that come up in everyday life. So I think it's interesting that a lot of notable great horror movies in the past decade or so have been turning towards those sorts of subjects to make horror films out of them, which it seems really difficult to me.
Yes, I would agree with that, especially because I feel like too many films worry about the message as opposed to realizing it's a movie, and I think that's what makes Get Out so great.
Right.
Because it
there's
doesn't...
a message and there's the narrative that you're actually watching. Right.
Yeah, like, it's just like a lot of things in one. It doesn't feel like, this is actually the message I'm throwing your way, shoving your face. No, it like, if you took, like, zero context of the deeper message, it works fine as a movie. Basically, people arguing with one another. So I think, again, like you mentioned, I think it's very difficult to do, which I feel like I'm happy that more of these films are coming out, but it also makes me scared for the people that are not quite as gifted for trying to be able to deliver this sort of message and narrative.
Sure.
That it'll just flood the market with that. But granted, I think too many people are afraid. They'd rather take like the safer route.
Right, instead of taking a risk, and that's how you get genuine thought-provoking art. If everybody saw the Mona Lisa and they're like, I'm going to try to draw a woman sitting over and over and over, well, people did that, and you don't look at their art because it sucks.
But yeah, so definitely strong script, strong message, and strong cast. Let's go ahead and let's talk about one of them. I think let's go ahead and talk about the sisters. One of them being Sister Barnes, played by Sophie Thatcher, who's the first one to initiate talking about Magnum condoms not actually being Magnum sized.
Right.
And I was very... It's very interesting with her character because, like, between the two, you have sort of like the foil where, again, with Sister Barnes, she's kind of more kind of like very uppity and very like, yep, let's go convert people, and just kind of peppy.
Bubbly. Yeah.
Yes. And which is a great foil for Sister Paxton, played by Chloe East, who's a lot more of the grounded, sort of just quiet, still very committed to her religion as well. Just two different.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think she's the one that's kind of, they sprinkle in some doubts.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
But still, for the most part, still...
Yeah,
is like,
there's definitely some shots of like, because that conversation about the condoms and stuff at the beginning really ultimately goes to a point where she's like, and that's how I discovered that God must be real, and it's like, and she's like, what do you think about that? She's like, the porno, and she's like, no, like, what do you think about, like, what was your moment of like when God's real? And she just kind of like looks and she doesn't really answer, and they cut to the next thing. There's like a few moments leading up to before they get to Hugh Grant's house where it sows in that doubt. And so that's sort of the interesting character dynamic, because they're both still in the church. They're both missionaries, trying to convert people to the Church of Latter-day Saints. But, it's done in a way where there's like little tiny detailed nuances between the characters that are like, well...
And I think that dynamic they do set up is interesting, because you think they're going to be like one note with that. But surprisingly, they're not, because... that's like their thoughts at the beginning of it, and then as the film goes on, you kind of just realize more of their inner beliefs whenever a crisis is actually happening, their true beliefs start kind of sinking out.
Right.
And I think that's very interesting, because I feel like, again, with horror films, we're not really used to having a dynamic range whenever it comes to character development. So seeing these characters, say like, hey, this is what I believe in, and then whenever it's pedal to the metal, seeing how their faith is tested, I find it very interesting with how they tackle that as well. So, and again, mind you, just the fact that they're able to cleverly write this sort of correlation, talking about condoms and amateur pornos, on talking about correlating back to their faith, I feel like is just nothing short of genius. And both actresses are very well played. It's one of those things I was a little worried about Sophia's portrayal as Sister Barnes being kind of bubbly, that I'm like, okay, she's going to be kind of the lesser character, kind of like crumple down, and then it's like mostly Sister Paxton, because again, she's just more serious, reserved, kind of
And
going
she's also
forward.
portrayed as a little more competent. They kind of
Yes.
mention like the sorry, I get them mixed up. Sister Barnes, the more
Yes.
bubbly one, kind of mentions she's like upset that she hasn't converted anyone yet, and Sister Paxton is like, I've only converted like 8 or 9, and she's like 8 or 9. So she's like, even though she's the one with doubts, she's like a little more convincing, I guess, or at least a little more competent, a little more well read and studied. Like whenever because Hugh Grant's character is a little bit of a debate lord at times.
Yeah.
And she's the one that actually like pushes back in intelligent ways. But
Yeah, which I think is great. And again, like, just sheer character introduction is great. Even seeing them walk through the city trying to talk to people, and just that small bit, I felt like those moments they took were crucially important towards understanding their characters and what they're going through. And they don't really like rub it in your face. Like genuinely them interacting with the people throughout the town maybe is like 2 to 3 minutes. It feels like something very short. Like it feels like gives them sort of a setup for how it's been for them trying to help convert people or talk to people about Jesus. And so whenever they finally get to the house of Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, I feel like that's especially like, okay, here's these 2 developed characters. Now here comes this shit lord
Right.
walking in, which let's go ahead and talk about Hugh Grant. It's hard to not say he gave one hell of a performance.
yeah,
Definitely at a lot of points. But again, I do think it's one of those things that it doesn't feel like a landslide competition where I feel like Hugh Grant absolutely like smashed, but he had some strong like monologues, deliveries.
yeah. I was wondering how he'd perform in a horror movie type role, especially in like a more villainous type role. But I think it was actually an incredibly great casting for the character, where he's this sort of like professor, elderly type who's very charismatic, which is, I mean, often, I mean, just to make real life analogs, I mean, that's not necessarily the intelligence part, but at least the charisma and the like. That's what killers really are. So they're like they're very good at enticing you. Hey, come get the candy in my van. You know?
Yeah. And yeah, I honestly, because I've seen like Hugh Grant in a lot of other films, and usually he's more of the smarmy sort of type of character. So whenever I heard him being in this film, I was kind of curious if this would be more of a kind of, I can't think of the word, but more like Silence of the Lambs personality, sort of like Buffalo Bill, just constantly hovering over them, and it just like not even talking to them as an equal per se. But that was sort of the interesting thing, because basically whenever they realize they're in a situation they can't escape, whenever they're like, let us out, he's like, you can leave whenever you want to. Like, he was just so matter of fact, so calm. And I think that demeanor was perfect, because I was expecting more kind of like, I'm trying to think, more malevolent sort of acting individual, and I am so glad they did not, because I do feel like, again, with a lot of hostage situations, they try so damn hard to make the captor like menacing, like pure menace,
unsympathetic.
Yes,
But that's just not always how it works in real life, and it's not always the most interesting angle to take in a narrative either. So
yeah, I felt like it was very interesting and a very smart play on the screenwriter's behalf to characterize Mr. Reed in this regard, where it feels like less of him like trapping them just because he can, but again, just almost sort of like some sort of like sick need to try to get people to believe what he believes.
right, yeah, which is, I mean, very poignant in the. I mean, the 2 main characters are doing that in a less twisted way. They're going door to door, trying to get people to believe in their religion, and he's essentially flipping that on their head. But
yeah, which I think is brilliant. I think the premise is very brilliant, and I think the film would have suffered more if they tried to like make him, I don't know, it's difficult to try to describe. I guess I'm glad they didn't try to make him like iconic, like, you know, oh yeah, the next horror icon,
Right.
Mr. Reed.
I do like
'Cause,
that. Yeah, they
yeah.
didn't give him some, you know, fucking costume ass look
Yes.
outfit and like, you know, really playing with the angles and stuff. No, he was just like a sympathetic, like a warm, inviting Hugh Grant character in a sweater vest kind of guy. But
Yeah, which I think definitely. I'm telling you, there's definitely a couple of scenes with Hugh Grant that I was like, man, this is like tight. Like this is just wound tight, especially with the whenever you get towards like the little like chapel office space they have that area, and he has his monologue there. I was like, good lord, this is like a tight scene,
right, which
like,
which is so important, not just from like film perspectives. Obviously, you want like a tight script and a tight, but obviously like the scene that was being portrayed was one that was supposed to have been rehearsed. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He's been waiting for this moment, you know?
Yes, which I think played out perfectly. Obviously, both for character reason, like you believe this is the most well-rehearsed situation, and then for audience because it was the most captivating, like one of the most captivating scenes, and obviously
it's like, I mean, and this and that's it's like this because this is what it is, but it's like listening to a really captivating lecture. I mean, and he's portrayed as like a professor, researcher guy that's like, here's my lesson on theology, and you will listen to it and understand, you know. So it's like it has all those elements of like an engaging, you know, lecture in a lecture hall, but under very different circumstances, which give it that thriller thrill, but.
yeah, and it's so bad because I want to talk about it, but I almost feel like giving it away sort of gives away the surprise, unfortunately. So we'll probably go back to it at spoiler section. But yeah, other than that, I do feel like setting wise was very well done.
Yeah.
Like,
which is hard because I mean a lot of the movie takes place in essentially one spot, but yeah, the way that they've managed to work with that setting and the sets that they built around it are really interesting.
Yeah, and not only that, but I feel like the descent they had as the film went on, both narrative wise, setting wise, and everything else there was very appropriately thematic. I mean, I think they even make an allusion whenever they look in the office space and they see Inferno on the wall, which I thought was super brilliant on their behalf.
There's a lot of great symbolism. I mean, even like in the very beginning, they see like whenever they enter the house and the door closes behind them, very shortly after that you see like a butterfly that's on the inside like trying to get out of the window, you know, like just like little things that like if you're paying attention you're like, okay, I see what this is referencing. Yeah.
There we go.
Now these two little butterflies are trapped, you know.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of anything else. I will say the only thing I could think of that is sort of a criticism, I guess, is I feel like the first half, super solid.
Yes.
The latter half starts to lose a little bit of its stability. Not a lot,
agree.
but
Yeah.
okay, that's good. I didn't know if it was just me, just sort of like...
No, it does
as the
start
film
to
went
fall
on.
off. It is a movie that sets up an ending that I feel like is impossible to get right.
Yes, it is so difficult. Now,
But I
Grant,
think they did a good job. I just don't think there's a perfect answer for that premise.
I agree. Considering how many speculative endings there could have been,
I thought it was going a different direction.
yes,
sure.
I honestly was more believing of that, but I feel like the direction they went is ultimately better. I would say
it fits the message better.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I would say that. But you're right. It didn't have like.
Even if the ending I thought was coming would happen, I'd probably be like a little bit like, really, that's it? You know?
yeah, definitely. It loses a little bit of gas towards the latter half. It doesn't ruin the film, but it just definitely feels like they had the first half on lockdown perfect, but then finishing up, that's whenever they're like,
and endings are hard.
Yes, it's super difficult. It's very super difficult, especially whenever you set up the premise that you do and everything's locked in.
But I don't think it's like a groan of an ending, but it is like a little Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate response for that. It's like, okay, yeah, like,
I'm like, yeah, I get it, and I respect the message. I don't know that it was the most entertaining ending possible, but I don't know if that ending exists for how they set it up the first half.
yeah. I also just found out one other cast member I gotta give a shout out to, Elder Kennedy, who was at the church, who's trying to figure out exactly why the sisters are missing. He's played by Topher Grace.
Topher Grace.
Yeah, I did not recognize him.
I thought it was John Green, to be honest with you. I was like, is that Hank Green, the other vlog brother?
Yeah, I don't recognize him having glasses and facial hair. I'm usually used to the bowl cut, clean face of That 70s Show.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was something that I didn't even realize till looking at IMDb, where I'm like, oh, it's Topher Grace. Neat.
I thought he did a good job for the role that he had. Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know if there's too much I could talk about in non-spoilerish territory without spoiling it, but
yeah, I'm kind of with you.
Yeah, so haven't nothing else to add or anything.
I mean, I'll just add, I think the sound design was really immaculate. There's several different moments that, it blends in with some of the comments I've made about foreshadowing and symbolism and stuff. But I think in the beginning, when the tension's ramping up, they do a great job of, like, there's a ticking light timer that, like, starts to increase. There's a drip from the ceiling that at a key moment starts to drip even faster. You know, just like little tiny details that they baked in to really that sells suspenseful movies like this. And it really is the difference between feeling suspended, you know, feeling like this is a thriller, something's about to happen, the tension. It's the difference between that and just like being bored listening to dialogue. That might be good, you know?
Yeah, I think they did a very good job keeping it a very tense, uncomfortable film at a lot of points. And again, the interesting thing I will say is Hugh Grant's character, I can't say ever has a change, like, you know, sort of Jekyll and Hyde sort of situation.
Right,
I feel
you don't
like
really see him crack, at least not in the the first half or whatever.
Yeah, so I think that's very interesting. It shows again a lot of restraint, where again, like, this is a person who knows exactly who they are, and they're just charging full force with that. So, but yeah, sound design, very, very good observation. Definitely very thematic.
And I think those are the best kinds of villains. Those are the villains that we remember and gravitate towards. The ones that they're completely convinced they're right and they want to convince others. You know, like the Thanoses of the world. The people that are like that. Those are the ones that you get the audience members that are like, yeah, he's kind of cooking here. You know,
he has a point. The worst guy, you know, has a great point.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit. But yeah, no, I'm definitely glad you brought up sound design. Did you want to go ahead and take it away with ratings?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I need to summarize all my thoughts so far. I think we'll get into a lot of that in the spoilers, and we've already discussed a lot of things I like about this movie. Ultimately, yeah, it is sort of the latter half of the film that I start to the quality maybe dips just a little bit. Not a crazy amount, but for that reason, I'm going to give it like an 8 out of 10. Not a perfect movie, but a very good, solid movie.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. Pretty good. Pretty fair, very good. Man, for me, I'm pretty close with you on rating wise. It's so hard because, like, I'm just remembering, like, how immaculate that first half of the film was.
Very compelling.
And so, even with it losing steam towards the latter half, I feel like overall just what I witnessed and saw at the beginning is very much what helps boost the score immeasurably for me. So I'd probably be at around, like a 9, 8.5 around that area. I could
be convinced to be a 9. I'm
Yeah.
definitely on the upper side of an 8.
Yeah, I don't think it's a perfect 10 like Get Out is, just because I felt like there was like no lapse besides bad CGI fire. But again, that's like a speck on a work of art. But this is really good and probably should be discussed more, like Get Out is. Like, as Get Out respectfully deserves to be discussed, I feel like this should join the conversation more.
Yeah, this movie probably should have made a bigger splash, because I had no idea about it. So.
Yes, me neither. I never heard anything about it whatsoever, and I think it should be discussed more. It should be discussed more with the very interesting premise and overall just theological ideas debate that it brings to the table. So yeah, definitely glad we were recommended this film by Dave. Definitely very good film that you should go watch. So definitely go watch it unless you've already seen it, or I guess you're just sticking around because you wanna. I guess you could do that. That's fine, but we're gonna spoil it.
We're gonna spoil it
right about now. Okay.
Boom.
Yeah. Boom.
Boom. Boom.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
This movie is 3 big booms.
AJ Big Justice. Boom. 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 Oh my gosh. Yeah. What do you want to spoil first?
Sheesh, I don't even know where to begin. Man, what do you want to spoil first?
I want to talk about like one of the, jeez, it's so difficult. I think I want to talk. Oh, what?
Oh, no. You go. I had an idea, but you go.
No. I like your idea because
no.
Oh man, it's difficult because there's a lot of things I want to discuss. But there's like, I feel like in order to discuss this bigger thing, I have to discuss a smaller thing.
Fair.
Which is the initial meetup whenever they're talking. And I love how the girls get into the house and stay there, because there's a lot of times that I feel like there's too many survivors that kind of willingly jump into the jaws of their killer.
Right.
But this was done fairly believably, given there's like a bad storm outside, and he's like, oh, why don't you come in? He's like, we really need the wife here. He's like, oh, yeah, I got the wife cooking pies.
Yeah, well, I love Hugh Grant's character, because at the start he seems like a really reluctant guy.
Yes.
Like everybody would be opening the door to some Mormons talking to them. They were like, you signaled that you might be interested in learning more, and he was like, yeah, sure, yeah. And he's like, tell me about it, and they're doing their thing, and he's like, well, it's super rainy, you want to come inside? And she's like, do you have a female roommate in the house or whatever? He's, yes, my wife's here, does that count?
Yeah, and that's a great thing about it, is the fact he feigns sort of not being smart, because he mixes up the sisters' names, like Sister
he's like,
Barnes.
Your Barnes and your Paxton. No, okay, you. He's like a really, engaged, sympathetic old man.
Yeah, and then he's talking about a female roommate, and he's like, oh, no.
He's like, I'm not sure I've got a wife. Does that count?
Yeah, and so, like, pretty much, because I could tell, like, the sisters aren't really wanting to talk inside, and I like that, again, that it's because of their religion, needing a female present, especially a wife, just to kind of help things out, and then sort of talking again, and I love the fact that Hugh Grant is basically data collecting at this point by just behind a false presence of just, oh, I don't know.
Well, yeah. And he never quite explicitly is just like, I don't know anything about this stuff. He's just like, he's honest, but at the same time he's hiding the fact that, like, and it becomes more obvious that he's like a religious expert. Like, he knows all of this stuff. He's like, I have a lot of questions, which is true. He has questions throughout the movie. He's like, I'm very curious about this, which is true. But he doesn't quite right out the gates just be like, yeah, I've been studying religions for like 30 years, and I have this book all annotated. And like, they just become aware of it when he's like, the Book of Mormon? You mean this? And he pops it on the table and it's full of notes and stuff. And they're like, wow, you're so well read.
Yeah, it's like he's just slowly kind of like turning up the cooker whenever it comes to it. And there's a lot of observations, like whenever he observes like the incision cut on Paxton's arm earlier in the film. And you can see like already, because I'm sure like the scriptwriters knew like, okay, Hugh Grant's probably the bad guy in this situation. So we're not really going to like make it a big surprise. But it was just a lot of ingenious sort of stuff. Like whenever he's like, "Oh, can you smell the pie that's cooking? You know, can you guys?" And he's like, "Oh, is it blueberry pie?" He's like, "It is blueberry pie."
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and whenever they walk off, I loved the candle reveal of Paxton slowly turning it around to see it said blueberry pie on there.
And that was, and I love that. Like immediately, they're like, "We should get the fuck out of here." Like,
Yeah, they're immediately like, "Nope."
oh, and then also when he first brings out the candle, he brings 2 sodas, which he's then like, "Oh, I know Mormon's not allowed to have caffeine, so sorry," or whatever. Yeah. But they don't drink it, and they're like, "Oh no, it's not that. We probably should be careful about our caffeine intake, but we can have it." But you notice they don't touch it because they're like, "We're not going to accept these drinks from a stranger alone in his house." You know, they're like very careful.
Yeah,
they're like always looking at the door, and they're like, "Your wife should really go." They bring it up several times. They're like, "Is your wife back there?" And he's like, "She's being shy. Let me go check." You know.
So I thought that was very interesting, especially because again, I'm so used to the sort of trope of like the bubbly one being sort of like ditzy,
just being
and just kind of like
unaware of safety
and just plowing in, and then there's usually the one that's like smart, that's more reserved. So I was expecting that dynamic, but I was happily wrong that they're both very cautious.
And I love how they also tackle a lot of modern problems in ways, and then they turn it into sort of fun moments in the movie. Like you know, you might imagine, okay, why don't they just call for help? But they turned that modern horror movie problem of everybody has a phone in their pocket where they can dial 911 at any time. A lot of times they're just like, "Oh no, my phone's dead," or some dumb bullshit. But this time he opens the door, and before he invites them in, he's like, "Oh, there's metal in my walls. Is that fine?" Or whatever. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's fine." And then they don't even think about it because he's so polite and upfront about like, is that okay? You know? And they're like, "Oh yeah, okay." And they come in, but then it's like, oh, then they try to call later. And he's like, "I told you I have metal in my walls," you know? He's like, "Why? So why'd you try to call?"
Yeah, and that's sort of the interesting thing is, again, like, he just slowly shifts towards, like, clearly being the individual who's about to educate some people.
Yeah.
With his belief. And so it's just like, again, a slow cook up, because again, he does sort of like the fast food analogy going into it. And then whenever it comes to the girls trying to escape, because I knew there's going to be a situation that they try to leave, and I was prepared for door being locked, and then because I'm so rehearsed with seeing this happen so many times, that's usually whenever the captor's like, "Haha, you're trapped now." But again, he just acted the exact same way. Just
right,
like,
he continues the experiment because he's thought so far ahead, I think, in this experiment.
And I do love them going down the hallway, because again, you're expecting a jump scare, which surprisingly, there's not too many jump scares, I would say. There's like only like a handful. And even then, like, they think they see him down the hallway, but it turns out just to be a head bust on a wall, which I thought was brilliant. And then whenever they walk into the office space, he's just talking to them like normal, like, "Oh, okay, ready to begin talking?" It's just like, "We actually have to go." And he's like, "Okay, well, you can leave." And it's like,
"Well, yeah, there you go. There's the door."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, we're having some trouble with the door." I love that's the first time where there's like a definite like foot on the ground where he's like, "Well, the front door locks and you can't.
Yeah.
It won't be open until morning." Like, it's on a mechanism. And then they're like, "Well, isn't that kind of unusual?" He's like, "Yes."
Yeah, he's just so matter of fact. He's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't leave." And like, I feel like him just being like, "There's nothing I can do about it," and just sort of gaslighting them, which is brilliant.
Right, which is what ends up being the whole point of the film, obviously, where he finds out the one true religion that he sort of hints at earlier that he discovered is control. And so he's controlling them this whole time, in his mind, in the same way that a pastor does, in the same way that religion controls you by giving you the illusion of choice, but the whole time, of course, you only had the choice that he wants you to make.
Yeah, which I'm curious about, because your prediction, like right around that scene, whenever he broke out the Monopoly boards, you had a prediction about what the true ultimate religion was, which was...
I thought, okay, so there's been a lot of like creaking in the house, and a lot of like the lights turn off suddenly, and the butterfly, and even after the butterfly, I'm just explaining all the things that made me think this. So the butterfly flies, and shortly after that scene, she's like, "When I die, I want to come back as a butterfly to like land on someone's hand to let them know I'm here or whatever. And so I thought, like, okay, the wife is like a dead spirit or something that's like controlling the house, and the one true God is some like old ass ancient ass religion. So when he started lighting the candles, there's a lot of like fire motifs in this too. And when he started lighting the candles and he was like putting his finger over it, I was like, Zoroastrianism. That's it, because he was setting up this whole talk about like iterations, and like, so what was the original? And I was like, well, Judaism was based off of, in part, Zoroastrianism, which was a neighboring older religion that was like the first monotheistic religion, and they called them fire worshippers. So I was like, Zoroastrianism, locking it in. But it wasn't that. I was wrong.
Yeah. Are you disappointed you were wrong with that, or?
I thought ultimately, as the movie went on, I was like, it's probably not going to be that. It's going to be like just some ancient old god that they made up as like, this is the first religion, and like, the primal demon forces of the earth. And the unfortunate truth, the reason why he didn't want to discover it is because you have to like sacrifice virgins or something. So I thought that's where they were going. And he's like, I wish I didn't discover it, but now that I did, I have to like continually give this person, feed them virgins or convert them into true believers of Cthulhu or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, they went the control route to make him an actual serial killer, which I liked, but not as much.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
It fits the message, which is his whole point the whole time, is that when talking through the iterations and all of his incessant blah, 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 about, making good points with well-researched points about religion and whatnot, about how it's, they're just organizations to control you, like Monopoly is capitalist. You are salesmen for your religion coming here trying to convert me to Mormonism. I'm going to tell you the truth, which is ultimately, by the end of the movie, that it's control. Cult leaders control people, religions control people for their own benefit. And I liked that because he wove that through the whole movie, even from his first like awkward moment with the girls where he was like, can I ask you an awkward question?
Yeah.
And they bumble over, and then he ultimately asks about polygamy in the Mormon church. And he's like, well, I think that Joseph Smith invented the polygamy thing so that he could justify having multiple wives and to, justify continuing having sex with a 16-year-old because he wanted to control people. And so that's ultimately what he's doing with his cages of frozen women in his basement or whatever, is he's like, they're here willingly. He thinks they're here willingly because they chose to be here, even though they had no choice ultimately, because I was funneling them here. This is the only religion. I got that, but it just kind of deflates, the whole pseudo-intellectual part. Because up until that point, like halfway through the movie, Hugh Grant's right. He's a psychopath, but he's right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By the end of it, he's just more psychopath than he is anything else. But
yeah,
as soon as he killed that one girl with the box.
Oh yeah, Sister Paxton.
And then was like doing the whole.
That was the cutoff point for me as well. Yeah. Like that was like the peak.
Because then he's just killer. He's no longer like intellectual. That's like making you walk into his death trap. He's just like, fuck this. But I like that they at least did the best version of that possible, where the other sister is like remembering, okay, I have to beat him at his own intellectual game to make it out of here if I have a chance. And she's good to play the game with him and point out his flaws and challenge him. And she's like, okay, well, how do I... Well, and so from that point forward, she's like, I think it makes more sense, because she's like, you were improvising. Like, something went wrong that you didn't expect for it, and that's why you're starting to fumble. Because he was fumbling, but I think any version of this script, he was going to be viewed as fumbling there. So I think the script was tight enough that they, like, pointed it out and made that the plot of the movie. But, and obviously the control aspect, him just being a deranged piece of shit at the end of it anyways, still ultimately leads to the point he was making, even if he's just like, well, I'm evil, haha,
Yeah.
But it was just a little bit deflating because he was cooking, you know what I mean? It's like, Thanos, to go back to the Thanos analogy, he also is a villain who has villainous, monstrous ideas, executes on them, and believes them all the way to the very end. But at least there's still some truth to like his perspective that he did some good, even if he ultimately did more evil by a more enlightened perspective of killing half the population of everything. He at least just stopped there. He was like, "Yep, I'm gonna go retire and I'm gonna farm." And
Yeah.
I think it's part of why people still gravitate towards Thanos' message, even though he's a villain and he's objectively the villain of these movies. This guy is like, yeah, it's control, and also instead of just recognizing that and being like, well, that's horrific and we should choose kindness instead, which is what the surviving sister ultimately ends up believing, and that's why she's praying at the end, even though she at that point believes it does nothing. She said it's just nice to be thinking about somebody else, like choosing kindness instead, even in a world full of suffering and yada yada. He ends up being an unsympathetic villain by the end of it, even though he was a sympathetic villain throughout the entire first 3/4, where he's just like, yes, the only true religion is control, and so I'm gonna embrace it. It's like you could just be like, the only true religion is control, so I'm gonna, not be controlled by it, would be the more appropriate response.
Yeah, it's tough because I have the same sort of thought as well. Looking at it, I know a lot of times we do sort of like, if I was directing or writing and I would do this. Genuinely with this, I feel like there's not a lot I feel like I could change to make it better, just because again the overall message is control. But like whenever it has the grand reveal towards the latter half of the film where he's like, what is the one true religion? Control. And I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Like,
but that's my thing though. Is I do think they did I think there are just some movies, like some concepts for stories, period, whether it's a movie, a book, whatever, that just can't be 10s out of 10. You know what I mean? You just can't. But you can make the best version of that possible, and I think that's what this is. This is the best version of this concept possible, and so in that respect, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. But I just think it's always going to be unsatisfying to build up a thriller movie about, okay, so what's the one true religion, when there's not an answer for that in real life? So you can't have a satisfying answer for that in a movie either. Yeah,
not to mention, I feel like trying to reach the resolution they did definitely felt a little rushed. It was just definitely okay. But again, not a huge major issue. It's just kind of like the way they sort of okay, how does she escape out of there? It was just like, okay. I was definitely sort of deflated because they like I said, some of my favorite moments, going back to the start of the film, is the Monopoly analogy.
Yeah.
Just the way he's like, okay, there are 3 major religions. You have Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And if you take it, it's like Monopoly. Monopoly, that's Christianity. But before then was this other board game that came out before Monopoly, but just wasn't marketed as heavily like Christianity does, because that's what Judaism doesn't do. They're not evangelist in that regard. And then you have Islam, which is the wacky version.
But Islam is the
advanced,
the new age version or whatever. He pulls out Monopoly with the calculator and
yes,
stuff or whatever. He's like the updated modern version or whatever. And then he's like the wacky regional spin-off he slaps on top is Mormonism.
Yes, Bob Ross.
Bob Ross Monopoly, yeah.
I thought that was great, and then them having to choose their own door, like belief, disbelief, and kind of Sister Barnes is just like, he just wants us to say he's right. And
I think it goes back to the illusion of choice. Both of those doors went to the basement.
Yes,
exactly. Is what they discover whenever she escapes, and she goes through the other door, and she sees that it just opens that cellar trap door that the woman came out of the first time.
Yeah, which I honestly thought was brilliant. And I love that every time that Sister Paxton had a comment to make, being like, you said this would take us outside. He's like, it does. It's like, it goes downstairs. It's like, well, if you would know, I'm on a hill, and go
and
down.
That's why I think this is a fucking r/atheist movie, because he's like, well, I asked you earlier if you saw the outside of my house, and you agreed you did, and you would know that it ends on a hill, so you must go dither to go ither, or whatever he says.
Yes, and so like I feel like stuff like that with the Monopoly or the Radiohead song, like you've heard the song before, right? And just talking about it just being regurgitated over time. Even throwing Star Wars in the mix was wild.
I mean, yeah, like, that's also true. It's like, Star Wars Episode 1, just like, countless other tales you can point to are obviously inspired by Christianity, which was inspired by Judaism, which is inspired. I mean, that's just, you can trace this movie back to, I'm sure, a dozen other examples throughout time. There's not, art is reinvents upon itself. You only have the context of what exists to create new things.
Yeah. I also love that he clearly has this up as a presentation. Like, he had the props ready, and he has a spotlight on the wall, so you can only imagine how many times he's done this.
Right, and the whole room looks like a chapel, and he's talking like a pastor, and he's got the chalk already, he's got his props around the room. Yeah, he loves doing this shit, I'm sure. That's why he has all those women in the basement already, and I'm sure countless others that he had to kill,
But yeah, whenever they do throw him in the basement, and again, he's trying to convince him that, he has like this prophet who can die and see the other side and speak, I definitely thought was interesting. The way that Sister Barn finds out the magic trick behind it, I felt like was a little like, I don't know how you caught on to that, because I did not. It definitely felt like a little too quick of a realization.
And the, like, Taco Bell thing they used to weave in, like, I recognize the skill in which they did that, where they, like, set it up before with the fast food analogy, and then we don't talk about Taco Bell, and then you wonder why. And she's like, this is why we don't talk about Taco Bell, is because I ate it and got real sick and almost died,
Yeah.
I thought it was a little cheap. Like, I recognize that they closed that loop skillfully, but at the same time, it was like, yeah, really? But,
but that being said, whenever they have like sort of the prophet come down with the blueberry pie and die, and then of course that's like the cutaway whenever the doorbell rings and they try to leave, and that's whenever the bodies are swapped out to Thane sort of coming back to life. And again, because she misread the script, that's what gives Sister Barnes later the idea that this was off script, and this is what starts starts relinquishing his control over the situation. And I thought like that scene, definitely I was like, okay, where are we going from here? And then seeing them try to pull like the matches over, definitely felt realistic with matches, because matches are hard to light without the little specific striker box. But I loved how sad it was with the matchstick that they finally lit, that they got jump scared and they dropped it, and the woman vomits the blueberry pie.
All over it. Yeah.
And then I love Hugh Grant walking down and being like, "Oh, you mind if I take that last match?" And he just lights a lantern as he's talking about it. Like,
and he holds up the fire to both of their faces too, and he's like, "You see that? It's different or whatever."
Yeah.
And then he closed. So he even he is improvising it from that point forward, like from the doorbell forward, but he's masterful at it, obviously, because he sets up that loop to close later, where he's like, "Oh, see," and then whenever he kills the girl, he's like, "Simulation theory, they're not quite good at the shadows of fire yet," or whatever. So you can see when they're a robot, and he pulls the birth control out of her arm.
Yeah, which I thought that was leading up to Sister Paxton's death. That did kind of surprise me, like, because you're waiting for her to say magic underwear to be the cue for Sister Barnes to stab Mr. Reed in the neck, and then you see something slice across the neck, and I was like freaking out, thinking that for some reason Sister Barnes like killed.
Yeah, yes. I thought that too. That was actually the thing I was going to bring up as my first spoiler, was whenever before they ever reach his house, and they bring up the magic underwear, and then they close that loop in later.
Yeah.
With the mean girls that are like making a TikTok in traffic or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they go over to her, and they're like, "Hey, you have magic underwear?" Whatever. They pull down her skirt.
Yeah, I thought that was like a fun thing. It was like what could have been.
Yeah, there was like a funny like context thing, and then they like loop in the concept of magic and magic underwear throughout later on in the film.
Yeah, because they're basically saying it's like a magic trip. And yeah, I definitely thought it was unique, like rule of 3, right? Bring it back 3 times. So I thought that was good. But yeah, the killing of I thought it was wild at first whenever he did it, because I was thinking, okay, he either truly believes that she'll be resurrected or this is some kind of joke, because as soon as he like digs into the arm and pulls out the device, it says like, she's AI. You know the rule, like the fact that, we're living in a simulation. She is one of them. And so starts like going off on all this thing. I was like, oh, good Lord, where are we going from here? And then she's like, I don't think it's that. I think it's a contraceptive, which again, I feel like it's not like a cheap shot, because even at the beginning with Magnum condoms,
Right.
Sister Paxton knew more about like,
Yeah. She
actual
was the
condom
one-
size.
yeah,
And it's like, how do you know? It's like, well, my sister's ex.
And then she's also the one that brought up like the porno in the first place. It was going on and on about it, and then Sister Barnes was like, "You watch a lot of those?" And she's like, "No, I don't."
Yeah, so I thought like that was that, like, I could believe she would believe that aspect, and just again sort of picked up what Sister Paxton was telling her to do, which is like challenge him. You have to challenge his ideology, continuing this. And so whenever it came to her realizing that the prophet was actually a woman who literally got killed but got replaced by another, I definitely was like, I don't think I could have explained it in that regard. I mean, I don't think it's too far out of the realm of possibility to figure out, but it's definitely kind of rough. I was just keeping my eye on the board with nails, because I knew that was going to come back in full swing.
Yeah, which is funny because literally full swing into Hugh Grant's face at the end. But also, she did come back to life, at least briefly.
Yeah, which I definitely want to discuss.
It made me wonder if they were going, because like you kind of wonder what the ultimate message of the film is. And I was like, is this going to be a film where they were like, see, the atheist was defeated, and actually you must have faith because miracles can happen, or whatever. But no, she just kind of like, I guess, had a second wind and then died.
Yeah, which I think that's more so the interesting thing, because I know there's like the small narrative bits about like her going down the hallway and just kind of finding the women that are caged, and that's whenever Hugh Grant has his whole talking of control. But like the ending, like I feel like they had a good idea on how they wanted to end it, but they couldn't execute it properly.
Right, like he like converts the more religious of the two missionaries to r/atheism. There's no God, but there's control.
But yeah, which again, whenever he says the line "magic underwear," and that's whenever she stabs him. Whenever she's in the room filled with like caged women, I thought that was like, okay, that's actually pretty clever for her to try to escape, and then her running and then realizing she can't escape because she basically doesn't know how to get out still, because it just circled back. And so I felt like the reveal of like Hugh Grant stabbing her definitely felt a little like, yeah, okay, sure. Right. So I didn't know how it was going to end, but I think her talking about sort of the prayer experiment on like those that prayed that didn't receive nothing, and then those that did pray did receive something, just showing like the results that it didn't change, that they still continually prayed, which I thought was sort of a nice message, because I feel like, again, it's easy to kind of dunk on religions, but also I didn't feel like it was just like religion for the win, baby.
Right. They did like I think they did an important nuanced thing where she was like, without saying these exact words, but saying like, so long as religion provides like a comfort or kindness in the world, then it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, especially like she's like, I just want to bring kindness to a place that doesn't have it. Like that's what her whole thing is. And even whenever Hugh Grant's about to go for the kill,
she's praying.
Yeah, still praying,
turning the other cheek, as it were. Yeah.
And again, a sort of a miracle happens. Sort of like what they, again, you hear a lot of times in life, that it's one of those unrealistic things that happened that people just say it's a miracle, because there's like it's hard to kind of just really dive into, oh, well, fortunately, Sister Paxton was still alive, had enough energy, just had a boost of strength to do that, when really she should have been dead given how much she bled out.
Yeah, and that was one of those things that like he spent so much time elaborating on, like, feel the pulse of this dead woman. Like, he knows when someone's alive or dead. He could have known that she was dead, but I guess he just neglected to make sure that she was dead when he slashed her with a short box knife.
Yeah, I guess so, but
which is like a little bit of a plot hole for me. But
yeah,
I do like that. Yeah, it kind of ties into that element of faith, and like she prayed and then a miracle happened, and she was saved. But at the same time, at the very end, like the last thing you see in the movie, sort of solidifies that she doesn't believe, that she sees this butterfly on her hand, which is like the brother Barnes landing on her hand, but then it kind of cuts to her face and it cuts back and there's not one there, and she's like doesn't believe anymore, but like she had a glimmer of hope, and she's like, no, like that's not it, I guess.
And that's what you took away from the ending there?
Yeah, I guess it was a sort of a symbol of losing your faith, but
I mean, that's fair,
to be sort of converted, as it were, away from that. So I think she's like, I can't, after experiencing the horrors that she experienced at the hand of a man, it's like, I can't continue to believe that after everything I've heard today, even though she still holds that kindness, even though she knows the Great Prayer Experiment didn't affect anything, even though she knows that, she sort of loses some sort of hope in the world, I think, is what I took away from it.
Yeah.
While still having the grace to have survived. But
yeah, I definitely think that's fair, because I feel like a lot of times, people that escape these horrible situations, sort of proclaim it as the will of God, which, again, they even talk about, Hugh Grant sort of mocks the idea as like, oh, you think it was God's plan for your father to die of Lou Gehrig's disease? That
Right.
was his grand plan, to have him suffer. And I feel like it's very difficult to approach a subject and feel like you're not taking a side definitively. And I felt like even if she did lose her overall faith in her religion, I still feel like the overall morality of that faith still exists within her.
yeah, which I think is like the most, if you're gonna make a movie like this, where it's like, you can reasonably argue that this movie is trying to make an argument for whether or not you should believe in God. I think that's probably the best message you could put in, was that the belief-disbelief doors, they go to the same place. Ultimately, what matters is how you treat others. And so you shouldn't be a homicidal maniac. You should be one that prays for others, even if it doesn't do anything. It's the sentiment, it's the thought, it's the kindness. To be kind to others is more important than to be kind to others because you believe some guy told you to do that, or that you're going to go to hell if you don't do that. You should just be kind to others because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, goddamn, that was like super poetic. I don't think I even want to say anything after that. I felt like that was like a video essay perfect end. Just cut off.
Well,
there,
it's easy to just relay that when I think, a movie that I think that was the message of the movie, and I think it was a well-crafted message.
Yeah. Damn. Anything else you want to add?
I mean, I think I've said everything I want to say about this movie, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those things that definitely, I know we're running a little bit shorter on the review aspect, but I think it's just because it's very much something that just should be witnessed. Like, you could talk about all like the tinier details that make up, or like any sort of like goofs or gaffes that they do sprinkle out throughout the film, but I feel like, again, the biggest thing this film is able to champion is sort of a profound message whenever it comes to this subject, and like the journey that all of the characters go through is interesting to watch from all three.
Yeah.
Again, I felt like it was just very again, I would say for the most part perfectly paced, even if the latter half definitely sort of like, okay, we're just going to jump to the epiphanies here, there. I feel like it just doesn't overall diminish the message, even if sort of towards the end, sort of like the mystery revealed and sort of everything else revealed is not as spectacular as the first half, kind of bringing up the issue, the problem.
Yeah.
So I felt like, yes, the way you described it earlier, it's a film that I don't think could conceivably hit a 10 out of 10. Maybe it could.
It's just like if you tried to make a horror film around, like, what is the meaning of life? Well, you know, there's not going to be a satisfying answer to that in a horror movie or outside of a horror movie.
Yes. But at the very least, did a damn good job of that.
Yeah. I think they did, as tight of a job as they could. It was a very, very well-made movie.
Okay, well, that being said, I guess we'll close the book on that one there, and I'm going to present you with 2 options on where we go next.
Okay, but they both lead to the same one.
That would be a wild twist. That would be a wild twist. Well, both doors lead to a slasher room.
Okay, see?
But
Inevitable.
on one door is Michael Myers. The other one is Art the Clown. Which door will you take?
I think I'd rather see Michael Myers.
Yeah. I think Art was respectfully. No, I'm gonna lock the Art door.
I mean, I would be open to seeing it, but if you're giving me the choice, that first movie was something.
Talking about Halloween or Terrifier.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I'd rather watch the which Halloween are we on now? 5.
Yeah.
5. Let's do it.
All right. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We'll see y'all again next time when we're Poppin the Scary with Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers.
Revenge of the Sith, baby.
That's Phantom Menace.
Yeah. Shit.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @ColeKirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're Poppin the Scary.